What's up, guys? Today I'm going to give you 7 easy ways to tell if somebody is good at poker. Use these 7 simple clues to find out who the weaker players are at the table, and then you're going to know who to target at the poker table, who to get in the pots against, because you're going to win the most money from them. So without any further ado, these are the 7 ways to tell if somebody is good at poker or maybe not quite so much. All right, guys, counting down from 7 to 1, here we go. So number 7 is to pay attention to your kicker. Guys, having played this game professionally for over a decade and having coached hundreds of students in these small and mid-stakes games, this is one of the clearest tells I have seen again and again that quickly lets me know who the amateur players are and who the serious poker players are. So guys, your kicker at the poker table is the other card in your hand. When you hit top pair, for example, the flop comes down with the deuce, king, 5, and you've got ace, king, you've hit the top pair with your king, and now what is important here is the other card in your hand. So a lot of weaker players will play hands like king jack, king 10, king 9, and I'm not saying you should never play those hands. I have a lot of videos here on the channel talking about the time and the place to play those hands, but a lot of amateurs in particular tend to overplay these hands, and professionals like myself take advantage of them again and again because we're only playing stronger kings like an ace king or a king queen, and you can see the very simple math on your screen there. Ace king is 87% to win versus king jack in a situation like this. Guys, bottom line, you are not going to be able to fight the math this hard in poker or anything in life, to be honest, and expect to win. If you want to start quickly improving your results in this game, you want to make sure that you're playing the right hands so you have the odds in your favor, and I'm going to show you what hands to play in just a few minutes here. All right, moving on to sign number 6, and that is basic pre-flop hand reading. Now guys, I put up a chart on your screen here of a 6-player poker table, and I don't have time in a short video like this to explain every seat in detail, but in a nutshell, EP stands for early position, MP stands for middle position, and now the 2 best seats at the poker table are the ones in green, the cutoff and the button. And the reason why those are so profitable, those are the best seats, is because you're likely to get to act last on the flop, turn, and river. And in a game of incomplete information like poker, when you get to see what somebody else does first, that is always a massive advantage. And then you have the 2 blinds, the small blind and the big blind. So guys, bottom line here, before the flop in poker, it starts from EP and then goes around the table. And then on the post-flop streets, it starts from the small blind. I know it might be a little bit confusing for you beginners right now, but bear with me here. So before the flop, you've just got your 2 cards. When somebody raises from EP or MP, you want to respect these raises because they are acting first, meaning that they know they have the whole table left to act behind them, meaning that they are likely to have a strong hand. I hope you guys can see the logical pieces of the puzzle here and how expert, semi-pro, and professional poker players reconstruct the basic reasoning patterns that most people use in this game. So when somebody raises from EP or MP, likely to be a strong hand. Now let's move on to the button and the cutoff. This is likely to be a weak hand because in a position like this, most people are just trying to steal the blinds. By the way, if you want to know exactly what hands to play, what hands to steal the blinds with, I talk about this all in much greater detail in my free poker cheat sheet, including what hands to play from each position at the poker table, how much to make your bet sizes, and so much more. It's totally free. You can read it in an afternoon. I will include a link to my free poker guide in the description below. But guys, basically when somebody raises from the button and the cutoff, I don't respect it too much. And then finally from the blinds, if it is folded all the way around the table and somebody raises from the small blind and I'm sitting in the big blind, I'm not going to respect that too much either because I know that they only have 1 person left to beat, and therefore they're going to raise with a much wider range. Once again, I don't want to confuse some of you newer players to the game. Believe me, this sort of logical reasoning does come naturally when you get more experience in this game, and I talk about this stuff on a weekly basis in these videos, by the way, so make sure you're subscribed. But let's move on to sign number 5 now that you might be up against a good or bad player, and that is you should just call versus aggressive players. So guys, what a lot of amateurs do these days is they try to fight fire versus other aggressive players. I'm an aggressive player myself, and I absolutely love it when people try to bluff me back because you're just playing into my game. What you want to do instead versus highly aggressive players who you know are bluffing a lot is you just want to call them in position. That's what IP stands for. are, and specifically that's going to be on the button and the cutoff, the two seats that we talked about before earlier that are the best seats at the table. And so for example, if I've got a hand like two red nines, the 9 of hearts and the 9 of diamonds on the button, and a loose and aggressive player raises before the flop, I'm usually just going to flat call them on the button here. And the reason why is because I do not want to raise them and reopen the betting so that they can make another raise behind me, and then all of a sudden I'm in a terrible spot with a good but not great hand like pocket nines. So guys, I have found that the best way to beat overly aggressive bluffy players like this when you have one of these good but not great hands like pocket nines is to just cap the size of the betting and just simply outplay them after the flop, and we're going to talk about that more in a few minutes here. So let's move on to tip number 5 now, and finally now we're going to jump into playing the right hands. So guys, I've put up some basic charts here on your screen for both 6-player and 9-player games. 6-player poker games are much more popular online these days, but 9-player games are still routinely played all over the world, especially in live casinos. In a 6-player poker game, I typically suggest playing around the top 20% of all hands dealt to you, and that is all hands in red on your screen. So that is all pocket pairs, most Broadway cards, so that's any 2 cards 10 and above, most suited aces, a lot of suited connectors. And then in a 9-player game, I suggest playing only the top 15% of your hands, as you can see on your screen there. And a lot of people ask me though, why the difference? Well, the reason why I suggest playing 5% less of your hands in a 9-player game is because when there's more players at the table, of course, logically, the chances that somebody has something good go up because there's simply more players at the table. So therefore, you want to have stronger starting hand selection in a situation like this. Guys, bottom line, if you are relatively new to the game of poker, I would recommend studying some charts like this. Stick to these hands only for now, and you're going to have a strong mathematical advantage entering each hand of poker. Once again, I do have these charts included in my free poker cheat sheets, and I will link that up as the top link in the description below. All right, guys, let's move on to tip number 4 now, and that is to never pay off the nits, or aka the rocks. So guys, nits, rocks, these are the tightest players at the table. There's a lot of them in today's games. I see them everywhere. They're sitting around folding every hand. They're waiting for pocket aces, pocket kings, ace king. They only put significant action in the middle, and what I mean by that is putting their money in the middle. They only do that when they have a really strong hand, like a flush, like top pair, like a straight, like 3 of a kind. I'm sure you guys have seen these players before. So like we just talked about with the loose and aggressive players who like to bluff a lot, the same thing applies here, guys. You don't want to play into their game. If you know that they're just sitting there waiting for the best hand possible all the time, they're folding every single time, they're playing super disciplined, then it should go without saying when they finally wake up and start raising and re-raising you, it's because they have it. It's not because they're running some high-level bluff out of nowhere. Instead, they're just playing their hand face up, and you need to adjust accordingly. So once again, let me give you an example here. You've got pocket aces, and a nit raises you on the turn of 9 of diamonds, jack of spades, 8 of diamonds, and 5 of clubs. Guys, you should without a doubt fold in this situation. I know this is a big shocker for a lot of newer players, but guys, there are so many different hands they can have in a situation like this. Remember, tightest player at the table. They're sitting around waiting for hands like 3 of a kind, so they could have pocket nines, pocket jacks, pocket eights, pocket fives. They could have flopped the straight with a hand like queen 10. They could have flopped 2 pair with a hand like 9-8 or jack 9 or jack 8. I think you guys get the idea. Guys, bottom line, do not fall into the trap of these super tight players when they raise you, especially on the turn or river, which I call the big money streets in poker. They're not messing around. They're doing it because they have a hand which absolutely crushes your 1 pair hand, and that's what pocket aces here is, by the way. It is 1 pair. They are clearly announcing to you that they have something that is greater than that, such as 2 pair or better, and therefore you have roughly 5 or 10% odds to win the pot. Once again, we don't make money in poker or anything in life by throwing our money in with such terrible odds, so you want to throw your hand away in this situation. All right, guys, let's move on to tip number 3 now, and that is to c-bet most flops. So guys, a c-bet in poker stands for a continuation bet. I have talked about in many of these videos on the channel that you should always take control of the pot before the flop, and what I mean by that is raising or re-raising. In fact, I made a video just last week showing you how much to make your raises and re-raises. You can go check that out. But guys, bottom line, all good players these days know know that you should be continuing your aggression on the flop by giving them a reason to fold whether you hit the flop or not. So let me give you an example of a few standard flops, like an ace, king, queen, rainbow meaning 3 different suits, an ace 5 deuce with 2 diamonds, a paired board like a 7-7-8. I actually break these down in extensive detail in my second book, Modern Small Stakes. I talk about the 10 most common flops, and spoiler alert, as I say in the book, you want to be c-betting on most of them. By the way, I will link up all my books in the description below if you're interested in learning more. But guys, bottom line, most of the time in poker, if you are up against just one player and you get any of these common sort of flops like this, even if you have nothing, you very often want to be making another bet. Guys, always remember, aggressive poker is winning poker. Give them a reason to fold. Don't just check. That is the way you're going to have the most success in this game. All right, guys, moving on to number 2 here, and that is to only slow play versus aggressive players. So building off of what we just talked about, the only time when I will slow play in poker, and let me explain slow play, by the way. Slow playing is when you just check with a big hand. So for example, you've got ace king, as you can see on your screen there, and the flop comes down with the king 8-10. We already talked about this situation before. We have top pair, top kicker here, which is an extremely strong hand. Remember, if they have something like king jack, we already talked about how we're going to be like 87% to win in a situation like this. So unless they have one of those extremely rare hands like a 2 pair or a trips or a set that beats us in this situation, we have far the best hand here. So in a situation like this, this is one of the only spots where I will sometimes check it versus an aggressive player, because I know that there is a strong likelihood that they will bluff at it with a hand like 9-8, for example, with bottom pair. Whereas if I just make a big bet here or a big raise, they might just fold their hand, which doesn't really help us because we're not getting any more value from that hand. Now, I want to be clear here, guys. I only use this strategy versus highly aggressive players. If we're up against those passive nits and rocks, the type players that we just talked about, I am literally never going to be slow playing here because I know they're just going to check behind, which is going to keep the pot low. We don't win in poker by winning tiny pots. This is a huge mistake that a lot of amateurs make. So guys, versus 95% of players in today's games, you just want to fast play your hand here. And what I mean by that is just making a big bet like we just talked about in the previous example, but versus those handful 5% of hyper aggressive players in today's games that you know just love to bluff all the time, I will sometimes play my hand slow in a situation like this to give them the rope to go hang themselves. All right, guys, moving on to my number 1 way now to tell if somebody is good at poker or not, and that is to simply have a look at their red line. Now, red line is a key statistic that you get in a lot of poker tracking programs these days, such as Poker Tracker, which I have used for over 10 years as a professional. I will link that up in the description below. If you're curious, there is a free trial. You can try it out yourself. But guys, in a nutshell, the red line stands for your non-showdown winnings. So guys, what you need to understand about poker, I'm sure this is not news to you, you are going to get over the long run the same amount of good hands, mediocre hands, and bad hands. The only difference between the handful of really top elite players and everybody else is how they play mostly their mediocre hands, which is honestly what people have most of the time, and their bad hands too. Basically, when you don't have much at all, which is the case in 90% of pots in Texas Hold'em, nobody really has anything. So where the rubber really meets the road in this game, where the elite players really get ahead, is they simply take away more of these pots, and we've already touched on a couple of those ways earlier in this video. I'll be using a lot of bluff raises, I'll be stealing the blinds a lot, and I've discussed this in many other videos here on the channel, by the way, how to make bluff raises on the flop. I made a video a couple weeks ago talking about that. But bottom line, guys, do not be one of those passive players who sits around just waiting to hit the nuts all the time, waiting to get the best hand possible. That is a losing strategy in poker, because good hands in poker do not come around very often. You need to be stealing the blinds. You need to be bluffing them sometimes in the right situations so that your red line is roughly break even or slightly positive. You don't want your red line to be massively winning, by the way, because that means you are bluffing too much, which means you're probably just going to get called down by any sensible poker player and start hemorrhaging money. But that is a topic for another video. Guys, I know that a couple of the points in this video today were a little bit more advanced than normal, but I hope that some of you guys got some value from this. By the way, if you want to know my entire strategy to beat the small and mid-stakes games, make sure you grab a copy of my free poker cheat sheet. Once again, I will link that up as the top link in the description below. Like and subscribe if you did find this video helpful. Thanks for watching, guys. I will catch you next time.